Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I get to learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. And I have a new guest, and this is Tara Kearns, who I met collaborating with my buddies Rod and Ben on the Infinite Film podcast. So if you want to hear about four people talk about Infinity War for like 5 hours, you can go check out the episode. But TK, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Shane. It was so fun meeting you over
Mm.
on Rod and Ben's show, and those guys are always so much fun to work with, and to be able to connect with a real cinephile as yourself and someone who shares with me a passion for teaching as well as an excellent match. And so I'm just excited to talk movies with you today.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, TK, and just want to lower your expectations. I am never funnier than when I'm on their podcast for some reason. I feel like it's Rod. I feel like Rod sets up a vibe, and then I kind of ham it up, and then just go with it.
He does. He creates the conditions necessary for funny to thrive.
And then he threatens to never have me come on ever. He
Yes,
says
that's also
every.
a classic Rod move. Yes, the
Yep.
strikes. I've gotten several strikes over there on his show. I don't know. I might even incur some strikes here on your show. You never know with Rod. So
Oh, I'm pretty laid back, unless he like magically appears and then like you say one thing about like a Marvel movie that's negative, it's just like Rod comes as a ghost and just is like, how dare you? But
exactly.
TK, would you like to shamelessly plug anything before we get into the questions?
Sure. So the way that I've connected with Rod and Ben in the first place, and then connected with you as well as many other movie podcasters, has been through my own show. It's called "There Was an Idea." ... A Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast. And as you can guess from the title, it is mostly focused on the MCU, though I also done a few episodes where I branched out and talked about some other film and TV related things. The lens that I bring to my discussions of the MCU are, I call them like pseudo academic.
Mhm.
So the story behind my podcast was back in 2020 at the height of the pandemic when we were in lockdown. I was working from home for a couple months, like most people, and the school that I worked at, actually, that I still work at, offered an opportunity for virtual summer camps for kids, where it was kind of like, do whatever you want. Like, this doesn't have to be an academic thing. You could do a virtual cooking class, or I taught a virtual screenwriting class to students, and with not much screenwriting background myself, I had like taken a Coursera, but I was like, all right, like I'll translate this to teenagers. But anyway, so I had this idea. I was rewatching the MCU at this time because pandemic,
Yep.
lockdown, like, right, it was the perfect thing to do. And there was one film in particular, and I think I'll mention it later, but it really got me thinking about some of the concepts that I teach about as a humanities teacher, a social studies teacher, an English teacher, and how the film was exemplifying some of those ideas. And so I pitched this idea to do a summer camp where I would talk with the kids about like somewhat academic concepts through watching the MCU films and analyzing the characters and things like that. And as I was prepping for that and started working with the kids, I was like, man, I had always wanted to start a podcast.
Mhm.
Another pandemic project was like buying the equipment and teaching myself how to do it. And so I started with just a couple of friends of mine where I was like, all right, here's the idea. You're going to come on. We're going to talk about this particular movie. You're going to bring your specific lens to it. I started with mostly teacher friends of mine. And then
Mhm.
from there, connected with a lot of other people. So connected with some comics artists and writers and various other podcasters who were doing both similar and different things with their own work. And so I have a couple of years worth of content in backlog. At There Was an Idea. It's on all of the usual podcast
Mhm.
platforms. The Instagram and Twitter is an idea underscore podcast. And I'm not currently active. The last episode I did was in December, but I do have plans to return. In the meantime, I've done a lot of guest spots here and there with other shows. just kind of working on some other big professional moves this past year. So slowed down with it. But if any of your followers are interested in the sound of that, you can certainly check it out. And love to hear from you.
Well, I appreciate that story, and that's really interesting. Because one, I literally posted on Instagram and Threads the other day because I caught up on the 3 podcasts that I was going to listen to, and now I could just listen to them on a regular basis. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, recommendations for movie podcasts. And I'm like, well, I'm certainly going to roll back to yours because that sounds really interesting, being able to
Awesome.
take a different look at the Marvel films because like I feel like most conversations you hear about them, people are talking like comic book movies, but I love the idea of kind of digging into specific things about them from a different perspective. And that makes me really happy that summer camp that you did because I just confirmed today that at some point in the fall semester, I'm going to have a movie night for a bunch of freshman business majors. We're going to watch Office Space,
Awesome.
and I'm going to task them with coming up with ways to improve Initech
Oh, that's awesome.
that isn't, laying off half the people that work there.
Uh-huh.
So that's exciting. I really like that. And
Cool.
obviously, I appreciate your passion for teaching as well. So it's a interesting parallel now. So I
That's
appreciate it.
right.
There we go. So let's get things started with everybody's favorite or least favorite question. But TK, what's your favorite film?
All right. It's both easy and difficult to answer this question because like the more I think about it, there are more films that come to mind. But my gut answer always has been for a very long time and probably always will be The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, 1980. I saw this movie at a very young age, like way too young. It was on TV, so it's probably an edited version. And my parents decided it was okay to leave this on and with me and my younger brother and to talk to us about the film and like how their take on the film
Mhm.
and your famous elevator blood scene was on TV and they're so into it and I'm really young and I'm like, am I supposed to be afraid of this? But it was really formative in many many ways and a film that I continue to return to and then especially as a teenager and then in college and then et cetera and so on. Every era in my life that I returned to it, I got something else out of it. And it was probably one of the first films as a teen that I really became interested in the filmmaker and the filmmaking
Mhm.
process and um, this idea about like being actively engaged, like an actively engaged fan of what I'm interested in. So not just I'm enjoying this or I admire this, but being interested in finding out more about what's going on behind the scenes, the supplemental material. So the 2012 documentary Room 237, which is like laughably like it's
Unhinged.
absurd.
Like,
It's totally unhinged. Some of the theories that people have about the process behind making The Shining and Kubrick and but it's just that's just to me like an example that stands out of something that seeing that documentary then so many years later and then returning to the movie again and getting to that level of meta where it's like yeah I'm like okay there's not more here and yet it still feels like there's more here but
yep.
at the end of the day it's still a film that I just enjoy watching and love looking at it, the aesthetic of it and the score and um yeah and it's a compelling story and I think I'll say more about what kind of draws me to that genre in a little bit.
Very fair. So that is my favorite horror movie. And it
All
just
right,
happened to be at arm's
there
length
it
when I
is.
when you started talking about it. So I just pulled
Awesome.
it off my shelf. Um the music is unnerving. Jack
Mm-hmm.
Nicholson is unhinged. And I'm not surprised that watching a Kubrick film inspired you to really connect with like the filmmaking and stuff like that because there's always something really impressive going on when you
Yeah.
watch one of his films. and just the steady cam usage and just
Yes.
the creepy following a kid on his trike around this hotel that literally could not exist
Mm-hmm.
because purposefully the floor, the breakdown of what they used in the film literally cannot exist on
Right.
purpose. So it's just such a haunting movie. And like I know Stephen King hates Kubrick's movie,
Yes. Yes.
but I love his book and I love this movie for very different reasons. So it all works out in the end.
Totally agree. I also I also enjoy the book a great deal and read it much later than I saw the film. Like I'd seen the film so many times before I read the book. And so was almost a little bit like, am I still gonna get anything out of the book? And I really did. Like it's quite different. And I had
Yeah,
known that it was quite different, but it's still really enjoyable.
absolutely. Now, TK, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
Okay, so going to the movies, I it was hard for me to pinpoint something younger than this. Although I know, like, if I asked my parents, like, I
Mhm.
know went to the movies younger than this and probably saw some of the, the '90s Disney classics.
Yeah.
But my first real memory of the movie going experience was Titanic. So that was I 97 or 98. So
Mhm.
I was 8, 9 years old. So again, quite young for that film. But this was I remember going with my mom and my grandma and my brother, and this was really like my introduction to like what it meant to be a fan, right? So
Mhm.
if like a few years later, like getting into Kubrick films
Mhm.
and things like that was like okay, like being interested in filmmakers and things like that. This was really like okay, like it's not just a movie. Like they're like I remember writing fan mail letters to Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet because they had like fan mail addresses in the magazines and stuff. You know what I mean? Like I
Mhm.
had the movie poster in my room. So that really stands out as a formative experience for me at that young age.
Sounds like it. You went all in on that.
Uh-huh.
And, Titanic is still significant today. And it's crazy to think that James Cameron has literally directed two narrative films since then. And it's
Right?
what, 26 years later? Close to
Hmm.
that. It's crazy. But James Cameron knows how to make an amazing film
Yes.
and create an experience because that film works on obviously like the romance level, and I think it's funny that Kate Winslet hates her performance and she's like, I'm so terrible with them. And but the thing is, it's like people bought into that,
Yeah.
and Celine Dion helped. And then you
Yes.
have all the technical aspects of just watching this mammoth of a ship just going down. It took me I didn't watch that until I was an adult, actually.
Hmm.
But like I went in thinking like, oh, this is just like a 3 hour plus romance, but like there's a lot of impressive things, and I should have known better. I had watched both the first two Terminators and Aliens plenty of times before that, so makes sense.
Yep.
Now, you alluded to this question, but what's your
Hmm.
favorite genre?
Yeah, so I have eclectic taste. It can be tough to answer this question, but the horror genre is one that I want to talk about because it's there's something to and I'll refer to horror broadly. Like I
Mhm.
like all kinds of horror. I like the
Okay.
slashers, I like the psychological. I like maybe like the supernatural paranormal a little bit less.
Mhm.
Um, but there's something to horror films that like it's like the distills the film watching experience and what I love about it in like a really specific way. Like it is an escape like no other kind of escape. Like it channels anxiety.
Yeah, sure
Like it's
does.
it's a genre that like it's so can be so awesome to watch with a crowd, but then
Mhm.
also like I get a lot of enjoyment out of just watching it alone. And I know that psychologists have looked into research as to why people like scary movies or haunted houses or things like this, and it's the adrenaline. But I really do think there's something to being able to deal with these types of situations in the safe environment, like the way
Mhm.
that your body processes like threat assessment in your sleep. You like it, like it's almost like you're processing certain emotions and like testing out certain threats, like through these sometimes brutal and horrible things. But yeah, it's always really appealed to me. Some of my favorite ones, I love the 1977 Suspiria. I
It's
love like that, and that's like, and the ones I'm going to name are like all over the map of different kinds of
uh,
horror. So from that to the original Halloween, the Scream franchise. I love the Scream
mhm.
franchise. And I more recently, Jordan Peele's work, Get Out, especially. I love Get Out.
Mhm.
And there's something to a piece of for me of like watching The Shining and then like watching Get Out. Like there's this it evokes something similar, like you said, like that real unsettling feeling that I just really get great joy out
They
of.
should have got out of the Overlook when they still had a chance.
Uh-huh.
So there you go.
Hmm.
It's
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of Dario Argento. So like
Hmm.
I own Suspiria, Deep Red, Opera, and a few of his films. There's just something so different about them. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. I'm a huge Carpenter fan. The Thing is my second favorite horror
Yes.
movie. It's so funny because like you mentioned that you have a wide range of enjoyment in terms of horror. Horror is not one of my favorite genres because I'm a big baby. And I get scared very easily. But I feel like the ones that I do love, I love
Yeah.
because like a great horror movie just hits so well.
Hmm.
And it's like it's funny because my brother is a huge horror movie fan, but then I found like I learned the hard way. He's a big slasher movie fan
Okay.
because he would be like, "Well, what horror movies would you recommend?" And I'm like, "The new Suspiria, Hereditary, Midsummer." He's like, "What the f did you recommend to me?" And I realize now that he just likes slasher movies. So
Yeah.
like I could throw Blumhouse movies at him and stuff like that. Like usually those kinds of things. Like I don't actually I forgot to ask him if you watched Megan. Oh, Megan was
Megan
so
Megan
ridiculous.
was totally ridiculous. Like, yeah, this year, it's actually funny to think about. Like January, February of this year, there was a decent number of horror movies that came out that like the first couple months of this year, I was going to the movies a little bit
Mhm.
less this past year than I have just because of other stuff going on. But there was a streak there. I think everything I saw was a horror movie of some kind. Megan was all right. It wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed Knock at the Cabin,
Yep.
and oh, I enjoyed Missing too. I don't know if that's a horror as much as that's like a
It's
thriller, I guess, but
it, it put you on edge.
it puts
And
exactly
yeah,
similar.
and it was such an interesting January this year. Cause like
Mhm.
Megan, Plane, and Missing all came out, and I'm like,
Wow.
this month isn't straight trash.
Yeah.
This is so weird. And then I forget the name of it, but there's a horror movie that Fear came out the end of January, and that was
I haven't
terrible.
seen that. I haven't seen that one.
It's okay. And I'm
Okay.
like, well, there's the January that I remember.
There you go.
Had to turn things back around.
Uh-huh.
Now, TK, who's your favorite filmmaker?
So for a filmmaker that I want to talk about, it's hard
Hmm,
to name one, but I'd like
that's
to
okay.
talk
I make
about
the rules here, so.
exactly. I'd like to talk about Sofia Coppola, who is like a totally different filmmaker than any of the styles that I've talked about yet so far. She is somebody who, if I go back to little teenage TK, who is discovering films and filmmaking, right? This whole thing that was kind of prompted by Kubrick and Hitchcock and some of these classics, and then um being drawn to the one that came out that I like saw in the theater at the time, like as a young teen, was Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
But also then from there, like digging into her filmography and especially Lost in Translation, like spoke to me
Mhm.
very deeply as a teenager. And then upon revisiting it as somebody, getting older, it's still something that I've found connection to. So those films were really, really formative for me, like Virgin Suicides.
Yeah.
So, getting into my own like education in the way of film and filmmaking and auteurs, and finding this like, I guess I'm a little younger, but like this, Gen X, like
Hmm.
female auteur filmmaker who really like has that lens, was really, really formative experience. So there's something that her films are, it's not for everybody. Like there, it's very slow moving. Her camera always lingers, which I think is
Hmm.
great, but there sometimes that it almost can feel too much. Like it's another kind of putting you on edge. Her characters are often very moody, and there's a real kind of melancholy tone and ennui, to a lot of her scenes and her characters, but a dry humor too. And just explorations of the mundane and like these kind of simple moments of connection between people, especially in Lost in Translation, that really speaks to me. And then her work too is some of the work that I first really got into wanting to know more about the decision making that goes into scoring and soundtracking.
Okay.
Because like the use of like the 80s new wave pop songs in Marie Antoinette is, I love it. Like I love the juxtaposition of
Mhm.
like The Cure and then these images of Marie Antoinette. Like that, oh, I always eat stuff like that up. And Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine did like a lot of the music for Lost in Translation, and the band Air did a lot of the music for Virgin Suicides. And so just like learning more about that process and all of that music, I love so much. So yeah, so just wanted to highlight Sofia Coppola for those reasons.
She has a very unique voice to her film
Yeah.
that doesn't feel like a whole lot of other filmmakers, and I appreciate that. Obviously, I'm a much bigger fan of her as a director than as an actress. As someone who was 10 years old and watched all three Godfather movies
Uh-huh.
from a young age, as my grandpa made me watch them because I'm an Italian American. Uh,
Uh-huh.
it's my culture.
Yes.
But I think the first one of hers that I saw was probably Lost in Translation, and that film's great. And I feel like that's why Bill Murray fits so well in like
Mm-hmm.
the melancholy that you talked about and that kind of vibe, because that's him.
Mm-hmm.
And dryness. I remember watching Virgin Suicides and being very blown away by that. I was, you think the title would
Yep.
prepare you, but it didn't. I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, what? And I actually appreciated her remake of The Beguiled a lot. I felt like it's a very it's a it's very different from like a voice perspective, from a directorial standpoint, than the original, because like the original is like a Don Siegel film who made
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Harry, and it's like visceral, and Clint
Sure.
Eastwood is in it, so like there's just a rawness about it, but there's such a hauntingness about her version of it that works so very differently. But I enjoy both of the films a lot. And also, that was at the point where I started becoming a really big Colin Farrell fan, and I
Okay.
appreciated him in that. And I liked On the Rocks a lot more than I feel like most
Mm-hmm.
people did.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I appreciate you bring up like the pace to her films, because I feel like that alienates a lot of people.
Yes,
But I think her films are very engrossing and very interesting in that way.
absolutely. The aesthetics are really what makes me feel totally, totally immersed in
Mhm.
that way.
Now, hopping in front of the camera, who are some of your favorite actors or actresses?
Oh my goodness. So there are so many. A quick list of people
Mhm.
who I think are really awesome. Ethan Hawke, Laura Dern, Jake Gyllenhaal, Ed Norton, Winona Ryder, Michael B. Jordan, Florence Pugh, Adam Driver, Kate Winslet. These are all people who I love.
Mhm.
There's so many more. Those are just a few people.
There's so many great
Um,
ones.
Daniel
So,
Kaluuya. I didn't even mention Daniel Kaluuya. And I mean, because there's, and then you can go back to more classic actors
mhm.
too. Someone who I just like, despite myself, love so much, and I know that like she's I don't know what like the public relationship to her really is anymore. I know she's had some moments of controversy and some moments of being more or less in the public eye, but I just really, really love Scarlett Johansson.
Mhm.
Like she is somebody who, I mean, and I think it's obvious I'm an MCU fan because we
Mhm.
mentioned up top that was the
Yeah.
focus of my podcast. But I think what she did with the character of Black Widow in the MCU is like fantastic. And I think within MCU world, I think that the Black Widow film and her performance as that character is underrated. But she's also somebody who, you know, brought life and voice to that superhero character, but has such range. Like, so she's
Yeah.
worked with, you know, Sofia Coppola, she's worked with Wes Anderson, she worked with Christopher Nolan and Glazer's Under the Skin. And she's like worked with like that film is insane.
Yeah.
She's worked with the Coen brothers and Taika and Baumbach, and she
Mhm.
like, you know, like she works with people who are so amazing at what they do, and really like she just really does good work and so many really really good films, and there's something to her screen presence. Like I mean she's obviously gorgeous and disarming through that, and has the voice that draws people in, but I've always been a fan, and I've remained a fan of her work, and man, Under the Skin is a crazy film.
Sure is. So, those listening and watching, please don't go watch Under the Skin unless you're expecting to have an uncomfortable experience.
Yeah.
She, and in my opinion, she should have won 2 Oscars in the same year.
Yes,
Because Marriage Story,
Marriage
like
Story is unbelievable.
her and Adam Driver together,
Unbelievable.
just tear. Because like No Baumbach got me so bad because I felt
Mm-hmm.
so bad for Adam Driver at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of that movie. And then the whole shift of it all, and Scarlett Johansson's so great. I think my favorite performance of hers is from Jojo Rabbit. That
Yeah.
is something special. And
Mm-hmm.
she brings such a unique personality and presence and voice to that character. That moment where she's portraying her husband and having that back and forth is
Mm-hmm.
that's special. And also that movie's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Um, but
And
like
like you said, the same year, Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress
she
nominations,
got
like
nominated for
unreal.
both of them and
Mm-hmm.
realistically could have won both of them.
Yeah.
Um, she was my pick for both of them, to be perfectly honest. Um, and the fact that like she obviously has such a great physical presence, but she
Mm-hmm.
knows how to leverage her voice in such interesting ways because her like
Yes, that's
it
right.
she just embodies that character, which I'm a huge robophobe. Um, I hated her the first time I watched it because I could not get past my own like no. But
Yeah.
watching it now, it's such a fascinating film, and she's such an interesting and compelling and alluring presence that it only makes sense that the character that Joaquin Phoenix is playing gets pulled into that.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's such a complicated film with so many, makes me feel so many emotions, uh, and fear specifically.
Yeah.
But like,
I'd
so
love to
interesting.
revisit that one. That I think I only saw that once, like when it first came out, and it definitely left an impression. And I can, you know, can kind of hear her voice so clearly and like picture Joaquin in the film. I really ought to revisit that.
Definitely
Especially
worth a watch.
especially now. I mean, in the past 10 years since that film came
She's
out, there's been
Chat
so many
GPT.
changes, right?
It's so crazy. I That movie sparked a 2 hour rant that I had with my friends, and this was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not a night person, but I was fueled on robophobia and paranoia. But it has
Yeah.
so many things to think about. Now, TK, what's a film that you feel like you'd literally watch every day?
Well, when I was a kid, I did watch the same films every day, and they were Home Alone and Matilda.
Love
Um,
Matilda.
yeah. And then there is something to the superhero genre that's immensely rewatchable, a lot of those films, which is part of, what drew me to that when I started podcasting. But I would like to talk about a different movie. It's not one that I've watched. It's probably not like one of my most top watched films of all time, but I feel like it should be, because I feel like anytime I think about watching something, like I never not want to watch this movie. And I mentioned Wes Anderson briefly a moment ago. Fantastic Mr. Fox is like, I love this movie so much. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I saw Asteroid City. I loved it. I thought it was really, really, really good. Like, just the topic and the setting for Asteroid City, like, was also, it's just something that I'm into. So that one, it really got me. But Fantastic Mr. Fox is so clever,
Yes.
and just like it just gets me every, like, there's always more to pick up on it. Like, it's funny, but like it's intentionally and unintentionally funny. Just like, I love the way that they eat. I love the way, yeah, exactly. I love the way that they use the word cuss in place of cuss
I do
words.
that in real life.
It's it's great. It's joyful, and it's so fun to look at, and totally engaging and immersive. Who doesn't like a heist movie or a dysfunctional family movie? And it's
Where's my bandit hat?
both. Yes, exactly. So it's just, and the voice cast is amazing. I mean, it's so
Amazing.
many Wes Anderson staples, but just fantastic performances all around. And until the film White Noise came out, the best last scene that takes place in a supermarket, um, for sure. Probably still the best. Although I did really, really love White Noise, more than a lot of people I spoke to. I
I
loved White Noise,
I
but
need there was there's so many things about that movie that I absolutely loved, but I feel like I'm still processing it, and it's like 7 months later.
yeah.
Um, fantastic. So, fun story. My classmate, I've known him since first grade because I was in
Okay.
school from first grade to senior year of high school with him. Senior year, he brought, like, one of those weeks where like we weren't doing anything in school. He
Hmm.
brought Fantastic Mr. Fox into school and told every single teacher we should watch this.
Oh, that's
And I'm pretty
amazing.
sure I watched that movie for the first time 3 times in one week because he convinced 3 separate teachers to show us it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And oh my God. I don't think I could get through a day without quoting that. It's
Yeah,
somebody like, and just like everything about it from top to bottom is just like, I'm an athlete. Like, Jason Schwartzman's like the
yeah.
unsung hero of that movie because Ash is such a weird character.
So weird. I love him.
And I can't unsee the behind the scenes filming of this movie because they did all the recording in action. Like,
Okay.
it's a clip of George Clooney on a motorcycle,
Yes.
Wally Waligorski in the sidecar, and Wes Anderson with the microphone sitting right behind George Clooney, and they're like revving it up and they're going. I'm just like, this is amazing. And it, like, actually George Clooney and Bill Murray like swiping at
Yes.
each other and
Yes.
growling at each other. I'm like, this adds such another. I didn't need any more reason to love this movie,
Right, right,
but
right.
there's such another level of love for this movie. The music choices
Yeah.
are so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That song in the grocery store at the end, like, it's stuck in
Mm-hmm.
my head right now just thinking about it. It's everything is so perfect, and like the texture of everything is immaculate. It's just, I like, if I want somebody to do a stop motion animated movie, it's like, get Wes Anderson apparently.
Yeah. Texture is a perfect word for it.
Yeah. Now, TK, what's a film that you love because it connects to another interest of yours?
Yeah. So I think this is where I'll talk a little bit more. I already spoke about this a little bit, but about the um the superhero
Mhm.
genre and how that kind of connected to, man, a lot of things for me, I guess, back in 2020. So the film that really prompted me to run that summer camp and to start the podcast was Captain America Civil War,
I had a
which is
feeling
not
that's what you were gonna say, and so
it's not like my top favorite one, but it's the one that like really when I was sitting there and rewatching all of them, I was like, wow, look at all of the, they're using these different rhetorical appeals,
yeah.
in their conversations around whether or not to sign the Sokovia Accords. And so 2020 was a weird time for everybody, but these things that I was thinking about for my day job were becoming intertwined with what I was watching on the screen. And the character of Steve Rogers, specifically as portrayed in the MCU, has really spoken to me as like a real aspirational hero of, like just like somebody who has this genuine goodness
Mhm.
and desire to help others and really to teach others. And you know his reasoning around like, you know you can't save everybody, but that doesn't mean that you don't try. So
Mhm.
anyway, so um putting myself in that mindset, like I was rewatching all this film, specifically this film, and it really was connecting to, well, I guess you could say connect to a couple of different interests of mine. One, this desire to podcast and talk about
Mhm.
the movies that I was watching, because I felt like there was something there to talk about. And then also, connecting to my interest of wanting to teach and explore these ideas. So um really all of the MCU for that reason will always be important to me, or the MCU up to that time, I guess I should say.
Yeah,
And specifically that film, I have a soft spot for.
it's personally my favorite Marvel
Is it your
movie.
favorite? I
Yeah,
wonder if I knew that from any of the shows you did with
and
Rod and Ben.
I love all three Captain America films. Like even First
Yeah, me too.
Avengers in my top five MCU films
Okay.
because it's something I also absolutely love Steve Rogers in the MCU and I love so like I'm from like the political perspective that is
Hmm.
presented in Civil War, I'm 100% Team Cap, like without a
Hmm.
doubt. And so, like, I wouldn't be signing those Sokovia Accords. I wouldn't trust the people that were going to nuke New York City in the first Avengers movie because they didn't think that the Avengers could take care of business.
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't trust a global political system that let Hydra hibernate for decades and decades. So like Steve has a point.
Hmm.
And I and like obviously Tony's perspective comes from a lot of guilt
Yes.
that he because of Ultron
Yes.
specifically. And it's such
Very
yeah,
reactionary perspective.
and it's so interesting because, like, if that didn't happen, he wouldn't be trusting the government either. He was up
Hmm.
in Iron Man 2. He's like flipping the bird to Congress and just being like, no,
Exactly.
I don't trust you. I don't trust you with my stuff. But that's what makes it so interesting is because Tony's in a specific point in his life where he's questioning his own judgment and maybe
Hmm.
he wants to run away from being able to judge for himself and putting it in somebody else's hands. But
Yeah.
obviously, it gets even more complicated because you look at the personal level of the fact that, like, Tony's, especially like, spoiler alert for Civil War, when he finds out what Bucky did
Hmm.
and the fact that Steve didn't tell him and
Right.
lied about it, that makes it so much more compelling and interesting because then it's like from a philosophical standpoint, I feel like Steve Rogers is in the right. But the thing is, he also did very selfish things because of his
Yes.
friend, and puts him in a bad spot. And I don't disagree with Tony for not trusting him at that point. And it's just so many things about Civil War so interesting and compelling. And for anybody who thinks that they're just a bunch of fluff, they're not. Not all of them. Sure, there's some
Exactly.
that are silly and like Ant-Man's fun and all good and nice and everything, but like it's a fun heist movie, and I love Scott Lang and what he wants to do for his daughter, but like it's not like
Hmm.
a deep movie. But
That's
there
right.
are comic book films that do dig deep like that, and I
Yes.
I'm glad that I was right that it was going to be Civil War
Civil War.
because there is so many things to break down about it. It's interesting because like you talked about how much Steve Rogers means to you. Segueing into my next question is like, who do you feel like is a movie character that you connect with on a personal?
Yes. So connect with and also like aspire to, and I'm gonna go in a totally different direction. It's Kermit the Frog, and I know that this is not just a movie character. This is an icon. This is a
Yep,
celebrity in his own right. The two films that are my favorite are the Muppet movie 1979 and the Muppets 2011. So so if I need to pick a specific Kermit performance, perhaps one of those, but he there I don't even know who to attribute this to, because I think I just saw it not even in an original tweet, but
mm-hmm.
it's been reposted all over the place, and it says, be a Kermit the Frog, have a creative vision and no ego, recognize the unique talents of those around you, attract weirdos, manage chaos, show kindness, be sincere. And
I've seen that on social media like 20 times in the
yeah,
past week.
yes. And every time I see it, I'm like, yeah, those are all of the qualities that Kermit the Frog has, that I aspire to, and I creative vision and no ego really, really captures it. So and attracting the weirdos, like the people around you,
Like
and
Fozzie
believe me, as yes, and
specifically.
as an educator, like someone who works with kids and with other adults,
You meet a lot of
managing
weirdos.
chaos and showing kindness while doing it is really important. So yeah, I love Kermit. And on the topic of the Muppets 2011, I do also relate to the character Walter,
Yep.
because Walter is like such a total fan. Like when he like
Mhm.
he's walking around with his, like, he's got his like little Kermit watch and his little like Kermit t-shirt. It kills me. It's so cute. But anyway, I love me some Muppets. I couldn't be on a film show and not talk about the Muppets somewhere.
So I'm also a huge fan of the Muppets, and I used to wear out my Christmas Carol and Treasure Island VHS
Oh,
tapes that I
Christmas
had
Carol.
growing up. And I have no shame in saying Muppets Christmas Carol has topped many lists that I've done on multiple podcasts because it is amazing. But Kermit, I love that. I love that pick. Kermit's great. And fun fact, so every month I do a movie marathon with my friends, and
Hmm.
there's themes. And this month, like this coming Saturday as we're recording this, is a musical movie marathon. And
Oh.
like I send out a Google form ballot, people vote. Like the top three things are Muppets Christmas Carol, Muppets Treasure Island, and the Muppets 2011. And it was like, well, I think we're watching. So basically, it's turned into a musical Muppet movie marathon
I love that.
instead. And Brett McKenzie is a genius. If you haven't watched or listened to Flight of the Conchords, you're missing out
Hmm.
in life. But he did all the music for the 2011 film, and Man or Muppet is one of the greatest songs made
It's
for a
so good.
movie ever.
It's
Ever.
perfect. But my
I,
question for your Muppet movie night is, when you do Muppets Christmas Carol, the version that includes When Love Is Gone or without When Love Is Gone?
uh, eh, I have it. I have
You do have it.
the special edition DVD that I have of Muppets Christmas Carol has the extended edition on it. So
Uh-huh.
I could put that. What was funny, for the longest time, I didn't know there was a regular version. I just watched that one and didn't realize that that wasn't in the original movie.
Yeah.
And I went out of my way to be like, what's the difference between the theatrical cut? And I watched the theatrical cut, and it's so much quicker. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to that song?
The
So
song that involves the adults that nobody really cared about and no Muppets whatsoever.
no Muppets. They're like Gonzo and Rizzo are just like, nah, this is a love story. Just walk
Yes.
away to the side and don't acknowledge it.
So
Um,
funny.
uh, I just love the Muppets so much. I used to watch like Muppet Babies. I just
Yeah.
like that's great. And Kermit is an amazing character.
Yeah.
Kermit the Frog.
He's the
Um,
best.
just all of them are like. Did you watch the? Did you watch the Mayhem on Disney?
No, I meant to. All right, so it's on my extended list of things I want to come
When
back to.
you eventually watch that, you have to message me and tell me what
Okay,
you think about it
I
because
will.
I'll just be like my wife loved it so much too, and like we'll be randomly placed, and I'd be just like Nora and just start talking like Animal out of nowhere.
That's awesome. I love
Animal
that.
obviously is a real MVP.
Yes, he
Um,
is. One of my favorites.
Now, what's a film that you love that you think would surprise people?
So, I mean, I think I've already I'm like all over the place. So I don't know if there are too many surprises that can really come anymore. But I haven't yet talked about, and if anybody who is listening has listened to my show, I've never really talked about romantic comedies, and that's because it's not really my favorite genre. So but there are some that are excellent, and it might surprise people to know that one that really is a guilty pleasure for me is not one of the ones that is like classically agreed upon that it's
Uh,
excellent, but it's just something that I just for whatever reason like freaking love this movie. The Proposal. uh
I saw that in theaters.
I don't think I did, but I have seen it so many times since 2009 when that came out. I do really like Sandra Bullock. Like she's
Mhm.
like a comfort actor for me, just like seeing her in something. And she was in so many excellent rom-coms in the 90s. Probably my favorite one is While You Were Sleeping.
Mhm.
But The Proposal is just so absurd. Like and the reason why it might also be a little bit of a surprise for anybody who might know me or my taste is like I'm not really a huge Ryan Reynolds fan at all. He's never really been like one of my go-tos. But I really enjoy his performance in that movie, and just it's for what it is, like the perfect, super cheesy, ridiculous
Mhm.
setup, and like the plot contrivances are ridiculous. But there's just something about it. It's just so fun to watch. So that's the surprise.
I remember seeing that in a theater. I saw it with my friend Emily, and I'm sitting there watching this movie as a probably like I'm 18 years old, like at that point, sitting there watching this movie and just being like, "What the hell is this?" And the one scene that I remember is Sandra Bullock and Betty White out in the woods, and Sandra Bullock singing uh one
Yes,
particular song that you would not expect to be encouraged to sing, and it's so weird.
it's so weird.
But the funniest thing in hindsight is the fact that Sandra Bullock's playing a Canadian who needs to hire Ryan Reynolds, like to marry Ryan Reynolds to get citizenship, and in real life, Ryan Reynolds is a good Canadian boy, and it's just like I just
Uh-huh.
I don't know why that's so funny to me,
It's
but it
absurd.
is. I think it's
It's
just absurd. And
it's an
also,
absurd
there's
film.
one thing that you and Hugh Jackman have in common is not being a huge fan of Ryan Reynolds. Whether that's real or not, I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's really funny because all I can think of for most of today was that photo from the set of Deadpool 3 that they released.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman in his new costume and just being like,
Hmm.
this is a dream come true. Because, like, I'm a humongous X-Men fan
Yeah.
and I'm a huge Wolverine fan.
Hmm.
Um, Probably could tell from the fact that I look like a wolf man. Uh, but like I thought Logan was it, and I was
Yeah.
perfectly happy with that. I just hope they don't screw this up
I know.
I'm watching you, Sean Levy. I'm watching you.
Logan was so good.
So good. So good.
Mhm.
That is one of the 2, 3 films that legitimately made me cry in the theater.
Wow.
I legitimately cried at the end of Logan. Uh,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna get emotional. Uh, my
But
last question for you, TK, is
yes.
what do you love most about movies?
So you know, I mentioned with like the horror genre specifically, but generally speaking too, it's just there's a way to process emotions. There's a way to prompt observations about the real world, right? Or about art or art making or all of that, and to prompt thinking, right? Whether
Mhm,
it's digging into maybe a surprisingly academic conversation because of Tony and Steve in Civil War, or
mhm,
or thinking about the characteristics of Kermit the Frog or something like that, or thinking about the interplay of music and visuals with Wes Anderson or Sofia Coppola, or whatever it might be, right? Just like um you're going somewhere else for a couple hours, and I really like that about movies too,
mhm,
which is different than the way I love TV. And I do love TV, but when like serialized television, episodic, there's something beautiful about that too, and really engaging about that, and you go on journeys with characters and this and that, right? But with films, it's like you're just going on this journey just for a couple hours, and you're knowing that you're going to recognize something that you see there, but only sort of like you're going to
mhm,
recognize it just enough, and it echoes your own experiences and your own reality. Like you're looking at something familiar, but like through a lens that's refracting it, like a little bit or a lot of it.
mhm,
So it's all of that draws me to it, the mental stimulation from that, the emotional processing. And it's also really fun. I mean, thinking about like this, it's a moment in time, unlike something like TV, where so much of the actor's experience of playing the character is then informed by playing the character over such a
mhm,
long period of time. And I'm kind of ignoring franchises right now, like something like the MCU, which is more episodic in nature. But regardless, like this idea of a performance, like a moment in time performance, and the playfulness around it, whether it's something horrifically disturbing or something that's really fun. I just I love it.
One, I appreciate your answer. And it's something that, film feels so magical in the way that it could take you places.
Yeah.
And being able to sit in a theater, especially, the lights go down and you go off on an experience. And some of those experiences make you want to turn to the wall because you can't stand to see what's going to be on the screen, which was
Mm-hmm.
my most recent experience watching the new Insidious movie because I'm a big baby. And because like that scared the crap out of me. I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but it did scare me. And I'll be sitting in a prime theater at AMC watching Mission Impossible this week
Mm.
and just feeling all of it. And it's an exciting experience. Now, I always like to wrap up my show by allowing my guests to ask me a question. So that's my
Mm.
little wild card here.
Okay.
So, what question would you like to ask the Wasteland Reviewer?
So, uh, I mean, I had a couple things in mind, but now something that's really that I'm thinking of. You mentioned that Logan is one of two or three movies that made you cry in the theater. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, yeah, I totally cried at Logan, but I also cry at a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I've seen fewer films than you have. And so definitely my percentage of crying is a lot more proportionally speaking. Um, but I'm trying to decide the way I want to, I'm filibustering a little bit because I'm trying to
Okay.
decide the way I want to ask this. I don't think I want to just ask, like, what are the other movies that made you cry? I think I want to ask, like, uh,
Why I cried?
yeah, like what is it about, whether it was a particular film or whether it's like a particular quality that maybe you found in a couple of films that brings out that emotional resonance in a way that doesn't come from others, because like clearly you have such knowledge, and
Mhm.
you have such wide range of tastes and all of these things. And but what is the, yeah, like where does the emotional resonance comes from that would differentiate something from everything else?
it's definitely an attachment. And
Okay.
I feel like that is the three circumstances that I can really think of that have legitimately made me cry in a theater all kind of stem from roughly the same place. So like I remember sitting, it was a 2011, I think, watching Deathly Hallows Part 2 in a theater.
Mm,
And Snape saying always will
mm,
never not make me very upset.
okay.
And that is from years of reading the books, years of watching the movies, and knowing how like that just that sequence of watching Snape's memories is one of the most tragic things I've watched in a movie. And the way and like I'll even text my my I'll even occasionally turn to my wife and she'll be like, it's like there's certain things I'll be, oh, just like always, or like send that GIF of always, and
Yes.
because it's just such an impactful thing. I never thought one word could really make me
Mm,
cry, but that's such an impactful thing because there's so much tragedy in
yeah.
Snape as a character, and I
Yeah.
think that's why and Alan Rickman goes a long way too in selling that. Why I cried at Logan. So I remember having X-Men on VHS and always loving Wolverine.
Yeah.
And, that was 17 years of my life invested in that character. And the fact that, like, in college, I had mutton chops like Wolverine, and people called me the campus Wolverine.
That's so
Like,
cool.
there was something about that movie that struck a chord because, so fun fact, I'm named after the movie Shane.
Okay.
And I'm sitting in watching Logan, and that scene where his, like, spoiler alert, his daughter, and Professor X are sitting in a hotel room watching Shane. And I had an epiphany that like, I've been influenced so heavily by this character for years, and then watching like what was supposed to be a swan song,
Yeah.
being influenced by the movie that I'm named after made one of the weirdest connections to me. And I just had a moment in the theater.
Yeah.
And then the moment that hit me is when he's like, that's what that feels like. And then
Mm,
I'm just like, because like he's lying there dying. That kid, when he takes that cross and turns it sideways, I'm just like, this, I'm gonna be a baby, just like crying of this theater. And one of the things that like I'll even occasionally get that emotional because of the internet
yeah.
when somebody pointed out that in the Wolverine,
Mm-hmm.
the character that can see how people die tells him he died with his heart in his hand,
Wow.
and he dies in Logan holding his daughter's
Yeah.
hand. I'm just like,
Yeah.
no,
That's
stop it.
uh-huh.
And every time I watch that now, I have that in the back of my head, and that just makes it even more emotional. And
For
then the
sure.
only other time was Endgame.
Ah.
And it's funny because now I watch it and get emotional at three specific parts.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is really, I did not expect, but in the theater watching that for the first time, when Steve is dancing with Peggy at the
Mm-hmm.
end, got me so bad because going all the way back to First Avenger, and he's like, I was supposed to have a dance, and that just coming full circle. Like
Yeah.
I know people are complaining like he did something very selfish and just went back in time so he could live out that life. I'm like, he earned it. Leave Steve
Yes.
alone.
Yes. Yes.
That moment got me so bad, and I think that's such a perfect because that was the last moment before the credits started rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Was them dancing, and I'm just like, it wasn't even Tony that got
Yeah.
me. It was that moment with Steve. But then I literally saw that. I don't watch movies in theaters multiple times. I can count
Mhm.
on one hand the amount of movies that I've seen in a theater multiple times
Okay.
because there's just too many damn movies to see.
Yeah.
I saw Endgame 3 times in the theater, which is the most I've ever seen a movie in a theater. And the second time that I saw it was with my brother because he couldn't go with me the first time for opening night. I teared up at the moment where Scott knocks on his front door and he sees Cassie as a
Yes.
teenager.
Yes.
Paul Rudd made me cry. That reaction that he has seeing his
It's perfect.
almost adult daughter, which also that hit. I really like the actress who they recast as Cassie, but like you can't take that moment away from me. And all I'm gonna
No.
see is that young actress who played Cassie in that
Right.
moment.
Right.
And like that hit me the second time. I'm like, why am I tearing up? Because it's such a powerful, unexpected moment. And then I
Yes.
did tear up with Tony being like, I am Iron Man
Yeah.
that time and the second time around. So yeah, it's attachment.
Yeah.
It's these are all characters that I felt so invested in. And like, I don't know, I guess I like I've definitely got like maybe I like teared up, but like I didn't straight cry
Hmm.
watching a film that just introduces characters for the first time. It's like a one and done kind of movie.
Sure.
It's that attachment, and I think that's the commonality between them because like I had very serious connections to those characters, and like Wolverine and Captain America are my two favorite
Yeah.
comic book characters, and you know, Snape's like the unsung MVP of Harry Potter, which is why Harry names his son after him. So it's just like
Hmm.
he knows it too. So,
Uh,
but yeah, so it's
that's awesome.
it's
That's yeah. That's really interesting that you pinpointed that through line, and it makes all the sense in the world because it's evoking so much. Like the one word always is evoking all of that like
so
history for
much.
you.
One damn word.
I love what you shared too about the film Shane, which I have not seen, but being in Logan, which is like that extra level. So really, really
Which
cool.
they took the plot of Shane and that whole sequence with the farmer
Okay.
is right out of Shane.
Okay. See, I didn't know that.
Because the whole entire story of Shane is he's a gunslinger trying to run away from his past
Okay.
and winds up on a homestead and winds up basically moving in with this family and at some point he can't hide his nature and has to stand up and protect them.
Wow.
And like that's Logan in that like second act of the film. So, but that's a wrap here on Lost in the Wasteland. TK, thank you so much for coming on and talking movies with me.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun, and it's not always that I get a chance to talk about all of my different, or not all, but many of my different movie interests in one place with one person, and especially with one person who knows everything that I'm talking about. So it's really really a awesome thing that you do here, and thank you so much for having me be part of it.
Absolutely. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.